If you're a fan of great defense, you're going to love this video. Welcome in Broncos Country to the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. On today's episode, you know what we're talking about. The Broncos pass rushers just got great news in a very interesting NFL statistic, and we're going to break all of that down. But before we do that, I have to give a major shout out to not only the Broncos front office, but to a Broncos legend himself. Demaryius Thomas was elected into the Broncos Ring of Fame yesterday, and I thought this was an incredibly classy move by the Broncos front office. And obviously, not only a Broncos legend, but a player that was just unguardable at his very, very best, and obviously gone way too soon. The Broncos actually put out a really nice tweet, I thought, which captured and kind of embodied how every Broncos fan feels about Demaryius Thomas. So do me a favor, before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's video, just give me a thumbs up. If not for me, do it for DT. And you know what? Get those 88s going down in the chat below. Gone way too soon, a Broncos legend we will never forget. Okay, so now back to the main topic at hand. The episode is on pressure rate. Now, why is pressure rate? What is pressure rate, and why is it important? Well, pressure rate is your ability to cause havoc in the pocket and make disruption happen when a quarterback drops back to throw. Now, PFF kind of describes why it's so important and what pressure rate really does for a pass rush and a defense. While oftentimes it's the players who tally the highest sack totals that get heaped with praise, simply using those totals to define who is and who isn't elite pass rushers is extremely unreliable. Pressure comes in a variety of forms, and pass rushers have a great ability to positively affect any given play for their team, even if they aren't finishing the play with a sack. So I kind of took that all to mean this, and I'll kind of, try to simplify it. Sacks don't tell the whole story. Sure, sacks are the result of your pressure, but pressure is the method that gets you the sack. And you could look at it in a very black and white way and say, well, the players that get the most sacks have the most pressures. Yes, but that would be an overgeneralized statement, because there are some players that get tons of pressure and generate tons of pressure in the backfield and make opposing quarterbacks' lives a living hell that don't always tally the sack. They might not be great at finishing. So the Broncos front five, you'll see a lot of these names show up in today's episode. The only one that actually doesn't is DJ Jones. All four of these other guys, Cooper, Allen, Bonitto, and Franklin Myers, all have a place amongst the very best in the NFL when it comes to pressure rate. Now, pressure rate is simply just this. It is the amount of times that you play a defensive snap that you're getting to the quarterback at a higher rate. That's kind of like the meat and potatoes of it. It's the baseline of it. Now, pressure rate is, again, one of those statistics that it's not the sexiest when it comes to an NFL basis. Like John Gruden famously said, I don't care about pressures. Get the quarterback on the ground. Well, again, that's an old school way of thinking. There's actually a lot of deep dive into analytics that will show you that the guys that get the highest pressure usually have the best pass rush. Does that make sense? So the highest amount of pressure rates throughout the entirety of the 2024, John Franklin Myers, believe it or not, was number one for the Broncos at 13.3%. Now, that's not good enough for top 10, but as you previously saw, the Broncos have 3 players inside the top 30 in individual pressure rate. So obviously, John Franklin Myers comes in at 17, Nik Bonitto at 19 with 13.1. So they're almost the exact same. And then Jonathan Cooper also makes this list. He was a little bit lower. He came in at 26th with 12.5%. But if you have 3 players that are consistently getting to the quarterback like these 3 do, it leads me to believe one simple fact. Tried to find a cool picture of Jonathan Cooper. There's a lot of menacing ones, by the way, where he just looks like he's ready to kill you. I thought this one was a little bit, of a safer pick here. The Broncos have the most consistent pass rush. Sorry to digress from my original point. Now, take a break here. Just pump the brakes for a second. This doesn't mean that the Broncos have the most elite pass rush or the sexiest names or the highest paid names. They have the most consistent pass rush. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, well, what about Zach Allen? He had a great year last year as well. Well, Allen's percentage is actually lower because he plays more snaps. So out of all of the Broncos players, Allen took like 526 snaps last year. So he's going to have a lower individual pass rush rate. But like our girl Nicki Minaj, and this is one huge but, he actually has a top 5 statistic when it comes to pressures. It's average pressures per game. Now, you'll notice something here. As I mentioned previously with the Broncos having a very consistent pass rush, you'll notice a ton of massive names on this list. Number 1 in the NFL last year was Maxx Crosby at 5.67. Parsons came in at number 2 at 5.38. Trey Hendrickson, third with 5, like dead on the nuts. And then Zach Allen was in 5th with 4.31. Now, again, you're going to see players that play more snaps have a lower percentage rate because, again, not every single pass or not every single time that there is a defensive snap is there going to be a pass. So your pass rush rate wouldn't account for those numbers. But the one thing that I love about the Broncos pass rush, and take a shot for every time I've said pass rush in this video, everybody gets a seat at the table. There's not one particular player like on the Raiders with Maxx Crosby or on the Cowboys like Micah Parsons or the Bengals with Trey Hendrickson. Everybody gets their chance to eat at the table. Last year, the Broncos saw a multitude of players with great pressure rates, but also with a high total of sacks. So this, to me, shows that there's not one particular player that needs to stand out more than the rest. It happens organically with Vance Joseph's system and the way they attack the opposing quarterbacks. So before I get into my closing thoughts about today's episode and the Broncos defense, 60 sacks next year in 2025 for the Broncos. Over or under? Last year they ended with 63. 60 sacks is hard to get to. I'm going to still take the over. I don't know if they get 60. Maybe the number 61. I'll take the slight over. We'll say 61. Remember, it is really, really tough, especially as, offensive coordinators and head coaches get more tape on you and they try to get the ball out quicker. They will find ways to make sure that they don't get dropped nearly as much. But I'll take the over here with 61 sacks. All right. Team pressure rate, because all we talked about was the individual statistics. Well, the Broncos were one of the best in the NFL. Second, actually, only behind the Dallas Cowboys, who, oddly enough, got 30.1%. And last year, I thought the Cowboys had one of their best defensive statistical seasons in their entire franchise. They had a great defense last year. It was just unfortunate Dak Prescott ended up, taking the fall. But Denver comes in at number 2, which is a great rate. So that means basically almost 30% of the time that a quarterback drops back to pass, the Broncos are generating some form of pressure inside the pocket, which I think is just an excellent statistic to keep in the back of your head. Before we actually end today's episode, do me a favor, start shopping with our friends over at Fanatics today. This Broncos hoodie is a sweet deal that they've got going on right now. It's 40% off. All you got to do is go to chatsports.com/Broncos hoodie. But remember, it isn't just hoodies, shirts, jerseys, every kind of apparel that you need to gear up for the 2025 season. Do it with this link that I've put in the comments and description of today's video. My closing thoughts. Pressure forces opposing quarterbacks to make errant throws, which help all defensive units. So if you're wondering, what does this mean for the rest of the Broncos defense? It means when Bonitto, Cooper, Allen, Franklin Myers, when they're making an opposing quarterback's life a living hell, the rest of the Broncos defense understands that there might be an errant throw, which helps the secondary, which could help a linebacker who's trailing, a running back or a receiver that's out in the flat where they can collapse and make a play. So everybody benefits from a high pressure rate and a good pass rush. That's why they say defense wins championships, and it starts with the big men in the trenches. Now, before we end, if you're more excited to see the Broncos offense in 2025, do me a favor, like the video. If you're more excited to see the Broncos defense play next year, hit subscribe. Until next time, my name is Moose. Be cool.